Hi everyone, welcome to another 7-minute software video. This video is going to continue our series on orthographic drawing, and we're going to start building plans and sections in Rhino. It's going to pick up exactly where the previous video on drawing elevations left off. Let's get started. The next drawing that we're going to make is a plan drawing. And a plan drawing is not just an elevation from the top view. A plan drawing is actually a slice through a building. Think about a floor plan, right? You're looking at a building that's been cut and the top of it has been removed so you can see inside of it. In Rhino, we don't actually cut our geometry, even though we could theoretically cut it in order to show the inside of the object. We use a clipping plane instead. And a clipping plane is another type of plane that allows us to automatically hide parts of the model so that we can look inside of it. This is going to be key for us to produce plans and sections, the two types of orthographic drawings that rely on a cut through an object. So if we're drawing a plan, we're going to have to be in the top view, and our clipping plane needs to be in that same orientation as the picture plane of that top view, right? So if the picture plane for the top is looking down, then I need to create a clipping plane that also is looking down. And so if you just click and drag the rectangle after typing in the clipping plane command, it'll give you a clipping plane that's oriented parallel to your viewport. So our geometry has disappeared in the top viewport. But if you look at the other viewports, you'll see that your clipping plane, this little object, is sitting on the ground right here. And so what this is actually doing is hiding the geometry selectively. And so you see the arrows that are pointing down. That means that it's showing everything that is beyond that line in that direction. To change the different viewports where the clipping plane is activated in, you go to its options. We can activate it in perspective. We can activate it in all the other viewports if we want. Because this is all the way down at the bottom, I need to raise it up so that I get a precise cut through the first floor of my building. And so remember, our plan is oriented in the top view, so we need to go to our top view and just repeat the same process that we use to produce the orthographic elevation drawings. So I select all the objects that I want to draw, and then I run Make 2D. Now the options here are a little bit different. They're almost exactly the same, with the exception of the clipping plane intersection. The clipping plane intersections has to be selected because we want to separate the lines that are touching that cut plane and the lines that are below. And this is because we need to produce the illusion of depth, but in orthographic drawing, we don't have the vanishing points that typically communicate depth. And so we use a different convention to communicate depth here. So we're going to hit OK. And so if you go back to your layers, you'll see that a new layer group has been created. And so what we want to do is actually consolidate these because these are too messy. The first thing that we're going to do is select the clipping plane intersection parent layer. We're going to right click and select sublayer objects. And we're going to put those into our drawing layers. I've created these previously to handle all of the different line weights that I'm going to be using in these drawings. Now the cut line weight is going to be for all of the lines that are touching any clipping plane. So I'm going to select that layer, right click, and I'm going to change the objects to that layer. Now I'm going to select all of the curves in this group. So these are the curves that are not touching the clipping plane. I'm going to select all the sublayer objects, and I'm going to put those in the medium line weight layer. So now all of those have consistent line weights, and then we can go in and add extra lines. Like I said, we can treat these as regular 2D drawings, but Make 2D has done most of the work for us. And the important thing here is that it has allowed us to separate the cut lines from any lines that are beyond. Now we can also use the light layer and the extra light layer to create even more the illusion of depth, but for now I'm just going to use 2 line weights. You should be using more than 2 line weights for sure for any complex drawings that you make. You can verify that you've done this correctly by turning off and on some of these layers. Turn off the medium, turn on the cut only. I see that this looks like a plan cut drawing. Now there are some lines that I'm going to need to clean up, such as these intersections right here. If this is a continuous wall, I should trim this eventually. And I should get rid of this line as well. Make 2D gets you almost all the way there, but you will still have to trim and edit some lines. For our section, we are going to repeat the exact same process that we used for making the plan, except for we're going to change the orientation of the clipping plane. A clipping plane for a section has to be oriented vertically, which means we can use any of the front, left, back, or right viewports. And so I'm going to go into my front viewport, and I'm going to create a new clipping plane. And again, this clipping plane is going to be parallel with the front picture plane or viewport. And you can see that it's been created here in my perspective viewport. And I need to, again, move it into the object so that it starts cutting through it. I'll go back to the options and I'll turn it on in perspective. And what I'll also do is select my plan clipping plane and deactivate it in all the viewports so that it doesn't get in the way. Now I can move it back and forth to remove certain elements. I'm going to make a section that cuts only through the stairs and through these windows right here. And so we can just repeat the same process that we did for the plan. So we select these objects that we want to flatten into a drawing. Make 2D again. Make sure clipping plane intersections is on because we're cutting a section. And now we have an automatically produced section. Now again, all of the lines are organized in their individual layers, so we need to group them again into our drawing layers. And again, we select those that are touching the clipping plane first, select sublayer objects, move those into our cut layer, and then select all the curves that are behind the clipping plane and put those into our medium layer. And now we can actually get rid of our Make 2D layer because we don't actually need that anymore. The next step is to clean up the drawing, right? Because Make 2D doesn't really get us all the way there. And I'm going to go through and trim out any of the intersecting lines that I don't need. So things like walls that are joined that should bleed into each other. And so I think this is pretty good for a start of an orthographic drawing. The last thing that we need to do is set up our layouts, our scale, and line weights. I'm just going to speed through those because those vary from project to project, but I want you to have an example of how to go through this. But now you can see that this has a hierarchy and is looking very clean. And so this is a perfectly good way to start making orthographic drawings in Rhino. There are more advanced ways to do it as well, and we'll get into those in a later video. Thanks for watching.